quite the journey.
Так.
Yes, I have.
Tell us who Yuri Psycho is. From the day, where were you born? Who were you till 2014 when you joined the volunteer battalion?
Я був
I
звичайним
was an ordinary guy. I worked at the market selling shoes. That was after finishing school. Then I enrolled in college. I studied for 1 year to become an electrician, but the situation in the country changed. War broke out,
Така ситуація в Україні.
and I made a conscious decision to go to war. First, I joined the volunteer corps. I served there for 2 years, from 2014 to 2016. I was in volunteer corps. And in 2016, I signed a contract with the armed forces of Ukraine.
How long did it take you from the start of the war, from when Russia first came into Ukraine, till you volunteered? How long was that period?
Цей період тривав
Well, it lasted about half a year. Yeah, something like that. In about 6 months, I joined the volunteer corps.
What was the turning point that made you decide it is now my time to join this war?
В мене мрія була з дитинства.
It was my childhood dream to serve in the army, and it was one of the most important decisions of my life, one that I made and have never regretted, even now. I saw the Maidan. I was still in school at the time. I saw the Maidan and what was happening there. I saw what was happening in Donbass, in the Luhansk region as well, and that pushed me to act, because peaceful people, the local population, weren't guilty of anything. And this is just ridiculous. These losses of life, it has got to stop.
So you joined the volunteer battalion in 2014, and then you joined the Marines officially in 2016. Why didn't you go straight to the Marines? Who is this volunteer battalion, and are they part of the official Ukrainian security apparatus?
I was the volunteer battalion right sector, well known to everyone. And why I didn't join the armed forces right away? Because I'm an orphan, and legally, the army couldn't take me unless I joined voluntarily. My friend told me there was a way to join through the volunteer corps, and in 2 weeks, you could get to the ATO, Anti-Terrorist Operation Zone. But those 2 weeks turned into 2 years for me, because there was also the food blockage in Crimea. I took part in that food blockade, and we got stuck there for a very long time. Then, after the blockade, I made the final decision. I had to join the armed forces of Ukraine, because I would more likely end up at the front line. And in 2016, on April 19th, I signed a contract for the armed forces of Ukraine. I completed basic training. On May 21st, I joined the 36th Marine Brigade.
36-ту бригаду морської піхоти.
Can you walk me through a day in the life of a Ukrainian soldier? What do they go through? What's life like?
Yes. Let's probably start with the daily routine so you can understand more clearly and in detail. We get up at 6 o'clock. At 6:10, washing up, bathroom. Yes, around 7:15, physical training. The workout lasts about half an hour. At 8, breakfast. Then, if it's conscript service or regular contract soldier, there are training sessions. Various kinds of training. Until lunch. At lunchtime, there is a meal again, lunch. Then we relax, followed by more training. And the end of the day, lights out. The entire day is scheduled. Right now, it's even hard to recall those very first days in a soldier's life, because actually, I spent all my conscious youth in the trenches. That was back in 2016. It's hard to remember everything now, step by step. It's way easier on the front line.
Провів в окопах. І це було в далекому 16-му році. Тяжко зараз вже згадати повністю все конкретно по пунктиках. На війні простіше.
How often is the clashing? How often is the combat? Is it daily?
At the moment, even now, the fighting doesn't stop. There is no such thing as a truce, a ceasefire, or anything like that. Any kind of rotation that takes place, it also happens under fire. Any evacuations that take place, they too happen under fire. The evac group comes to pick up the wounded, and someone from the evac group also ends up wounded, becomes a cargo 300. So it's very hard and exhausting, both for the people and the soldiers themselves.
I'm glad to hear that the Ukrainian military is prioritizing breakfast and lunch. You seem to have it scheduled into your day. That's very good to hear. What do you have for breakfast and lunch? What does a Ukrainian soldier eat?
Well, if a soldier doesn't get breakfast or lunch, we won't be able to carry out his duties properly. My breakfast is usually just some scrambled eggs, a small sandwich, maybe a bit of salad, and that's it. I was discharged from the military service in 2023, so since then, I've been a veteran. Essentially, I'm now a civilian, more of a civilian than anything else.
23-го року я ветеран, я вже, скоріш за все, цивільна людина. Більше цивільна людина.
Tell me about the Battle of Mariupol.
Oh, I think you've seen a lot. There are videos and articles about Mariupol. That was the hottest and most terrifying moment of my life. We arrived for a rotation on December 6, 2021. But even before that, we already knew an invasion was coming. We were preparing for it, but it wasn't being made public, not to the general audience. Military personnel knew that something more than just saber rattling at the border was going on and going to happen. Everything started about 3 weeks before the full-scale invasion. They began targeting our evacuation routes with airstrikes and artillery, cutting off our escape paths and logistical support. They wanted to encircle us from the very beginning. At the time, we were stationed in a village of Vodane, and that was about 3 weeks before the invasion began. The most brutal night was the first one, February 22nd. We were already taking losses by then. There were already heavy casualties, because no one truly expected a full-scale war to break out. Before that, there was the ATO, there was the JFO. It was a trench war. Fire from the trenches, small arms like 5.45 rifles, machine guns, nothing beyond that. Yes, there was artillery too, but it was relatively limited. Maybe one wounded in a day, one killed in a week. People had gotten used to that rhythm. That's why no one expected that on February 22nd, a battle would begin that would lead to such devastating losses. We held our positions until February 27th. Up to that point, we hadn't retreated or surrendered a single position. Then we received an order from our command. At 1 a.m. on February 27th, we were to evacuate and withdraw from the village of Vodane and redeploy to the city of Mariupol to establish defensive positions on the city's outskirts. That order likely saved our lives, because at 5 a.m., Russian aircraft completely wiped the village off the map. It was obliterated, reduced to nothing. We started preparing to move at 1 a.m., but we weren't able to leave until around 4:30. As soon as we got onto the highway, we saw the village burning. It had been completely destroyed. We arrived in the city of Mariupol, first at the Ilyich steel plant. That's where we regrouped, reviewed the map, and identified our new defensive lines. Then we went out to assess the terrain. We made the decision to relocate to the base of the 503rd Separate Marine Battalion. They gave us a hot meal there, and at that point, the city was still more or less under Ukrainian control. Our land was still free, and everything felt relatively stable. We even felt almost safe. But yes, the aircrafts were already flying overhead. The bombings had begun. After breakfast, we were ordered to rest, to lie down and get some sleep, because that evening some kind of provocation or hostile action was expected, possibly even an assault. We rested until around noon, but then we started to smell smoke, the scent of burning, spreading through the corridors of the building. Looking out the window, we saw that the battalion headquarters was on fire. It was burning. The command clearly understood that things were about to go very, very wrong, and they had already started burning documents. I don't know exactly what they were destroying, maybe personnel files or something else, but the entire leadership of the 503rd Battalion evacuated. They left, and no one told us anything. We were left on our own. We evacuated to the street, regrouped, and set up a circular defense in the area around the village of Volontarivka. I was a mortar operator. We set up the mortar, and right after that, we repelled 4 assaults. 4 attacks, all pushed back, which gave our infantry time to dig in deeper and strengthen their positions. This went on until March 10th. Constant shelling and artillery fire. Unfortunately, we had no air support. At first, while we still had 120mm fragmentation mortar shells, things were manageable. There were no major breakthroughs. But once we ran out of those shells and had no way to resupply, we were forced to use smoke shells to repel assaults. Technically, smoke shells are designed to create cover, but they still break apart and can injure infantry with fragments. So we used them as a last resort. But once we started firing smoke shells, the Russians realized that we were out of high explosives and fragmentation rounds, that we were basically out of real firepower. They knew they just had to wait another day or two, and then they could start walking in freely. And what happened? Exactly that. Just 3 days later. From that point on, we kept falling back, street by street, yard by yard, house by house. Every day we retreated a little more. It was on March 10th that I was wounded. A Grad rocket from a multiple launch system landed just half a meter away from me. We had just returned from the city center. We learned that on the grounds of the University of Mariupol, there were 3 young women who had just given birth. They were hiding with their newborns in a bunker beneath the university. My comrade and I gathered every bit of warm clothing we could find, collected food, loaded it with the vehicle, and brought it to them. They were so happy to see us, overjoyed. In times like that, even the smallest gesture, a kind word, any sign of support meant the world to people. On our way back from the university, my comrade and I came under aerial bombardment. We barely made it back. The tires were blown, and the vehicle looked like a sieve from all the shrapnel. We were driving down the main avenue in a T5 Volkswagen when an air bomb dropped just 30 to 50 meters ahead, right onto a 9-story apartment building. The entire building was obliterated, all the way down to the basement, just gone. The blast shook our vehicle violently. We were swerving uncontrollably down the avenue. When we finally got back, we came under the fire again, this time from a BMP, infantry fighting vehicle. Our own anti-aircraft gunners had blocked the road. They were in the middle of a firefight. We sat there in the car, waiting for them to finish shooting, all while still under bombardment. Once they pulled back, we returned to our position. I parked the car, and almost immediately, Grad rockets began raining down on us. The shelling lasted about 10 minutes, explosions all around us. Then suddenly, silence. Complete and unnerving silence.
Максимальна тиша така
You could hear the birds singing. The sun had started to warm everything up. It felt like everything had gone still, quiet. After 5 or 10 minutes, I decided to go check on the vehicles. The rockets had landed exactly where we'd parked them. I walked towards them. I was just about 2 meters away from one of the cars when the Grad rocket hit, half a meter from me. It tore off my leg. The blast threw me. I landed hard, and I could feel the earth beneath me with my back and my hips. I opened my eyes. Everything was raining, blurry, like in a movie. Concussion. And honestly, it really was like in the films. I hadn't realized before how close those depictions were to reality. I had my IFAC, a NATO-issued one, actually. I unfastened it, pulled out a tourniquet, looped it over my leg, tightened it, and then just lay there. I thought to myself, damn, I need to signal that I'm wounded. I'm a Cargo 300. But I didn't have a radio, so I just started yelling, screaming, Misha, brother, where are you? I'm a Cargo 300. Don't you hear me? In my head, it felt like I was screaming so loudly, but it turned out I could barely get the words out. I'd already lost a lot of blood.
І чекаю, поки хтось прибіжить. Дивлюсь, побратим вибігає з позиції, знімає каску, бронік.
I remember collapsing onto my elbow, laying there just waiting for someone to come. And then I saw him, my comrade, running out from the position. He ripped off his helmet, dropped his vest and rifle and shouted, "Brother, I'm right here. You're gonna be okay. I'm here."
Це також можливо, я не знаю, на той момент мені здавалося, що я його закрутив добре.
A civilian ran up to me, someone we had spoken with just a few days earlier, and began tightening the tourniquet even more. At the time, I thought I'd secured it well, but he tightened it even further, stopping the bleeding completely. My brothers-in-arms quickly lifted me and carried me to the evacuation vehicle. We drove to the command post and rammed through the metal gates with the car. Ironically, just hours earlier, a comrade nicknamed Vitamin had repaired them. They transferred me to the medevac vehicle from the field hospital, gave me a shot of nalbuphine, and 15 minutes later, I was already at the hospital. The next day, I woke up without my leg. The only thing the surgeons managed to do was to amputate. No one removed the shrapnel. 13 of us had been brought in with serious injuries, and only 2 surgeons were on duty. They had to perform emergency amputations as fast as possible, just to stabilize us, to keep us alive. And so, the next morning, I woke up in the hospital, already missing part of myself.
Я пробув особисто в шпиталі 6 днів. 16 березня прилетіла авіабомба якраз.
I stayed in that hospital for 6 days. On March 16, an air bomb hit the courtyard of the hospital. I remember just hearing the whistle. It was lying there completely exposed, covered in tubes, with one thing coming out here, another there. I was in the bed when I saw the window frame with all the glass still in it flying straight at me. I just managed to cover myself with a blanket and block the frame with my arms. I thought to myself, no, if I stay here any longer, this will be the end. Barely able to stand up, my vision blurry, I threw in whatever clothing was nearby, a sweater, some pants, grabbed my crutches and made it to the hallway, and immediately collapsed. Lost consciousness on the spot. Ptashka, Katerina Polishuk, maybe you've heard of her, she caught me. Always say she took me under her wing. She carried me down into the hospital basement, where they gave me another injection. We spent the night there.
В підвал цього шпиталю, де мені зробили ще один укол. І там ми переночували. Потім на наступний день На наступний день ми вже евакуйовувалися з шпиталю на територію заводу «Азовмаш». Як вийшли тільки з підвалу цього шпиталю, тіла лежали повсюди просто. Просто лежали тіла повсюди. Не було такого місця, куди б ти не глянув, де не було б якогось чорного пакета або якогось
The next day,
останку.
we evacuated from the hospital to the
Це було
Azovmash
жахливо,
plant.
просто максимально.
And when we
Всюди
came out of the
лежали
hospital
якісь
basement,
тіла,
bodies were
якісь
everywhere.
взуття, і все
There wasn't a
окровавлено.
single place you could
Це
look
було
without
дуже
seeing a
тяжко
black
і
body bag or
страшно,
human
розповідно
remains.
також.
The ground was completely
Ми
covered.
евакуювалися якраз
Shoes,
на Азовмаш, в
limbs,
доміну печ,
blood.
в
everything
сам
was
проход
soaked
до
in
доміної
it.
печі. Ми там пробули десь,
It was incredibly
не
hard,
знаю, тиждень.
terrifying in its own way. We evacuated to Azovmash. to the last furnace. We stayed right inside the furnace passage itself. We were there for about a week. Then, we received orders to evacuate to Ilyich Iron and Steel Works, to another bunker, because Russian forces had advanced to within 300 meters of our position. Just 300 meters away, only a railway line and one hangar stood between us and them. We could hear the gunfire, even their voices, their shouting and talking. All of us who were wounded, the 300 cargo, were being loaded into KAMAZ trucks under constant fire. Shelling, airstrikes, artillery. Somehow, miraculously, we survived. Honestly, I never really believed in God, but at that moment, I started to believe that there must be something greater in this world. Something extraordinary was protecting us. Every shell missed. 2 hangars, 3 trucks, and all the hits landed only on the roofs of the hangars. If even one of those shells had landed between the hangars, we all would have died instantly. Something was shielding us. All the incoming fire was somehow diverted away from us. Thank God. We moved to the Ilyich Iron and Steel Works. First to one bunker, where we stayed for 2 days, then to another for 2 more days, until Russian forces got close again. Then we moved to a third bunker, where we stayed for 3 days. That's where the most intense shelling happened, even more brutal than at the hospital. In the evening, an order came through, and all around the hospital everything was burning. Sitting in the bunker, you could already smell the smoke in the air. That's when the order came. The 36th Marine Brigade was going to attempt a breakout. April 9, a breakout to mainland Ukraine. But we were deep behind enemy lines, about 190 kilometers from friendly territory. The entire 190 kilometers and more was surrounded by the enemy. It was just not realistic. A breakout like that, it was a one-way ticket. There was no way we could break through a corridor that long, especially not in the small groups we had, only 2 or 3 convoys. Our commander made the decision. We lined up in a column, waiting for orders. The 1st Battalion set out and immediately came under fire. They were torn apart. Some were taken prisoner, some were executed on the spot. A few managed to escape and made it back to Ilyich, to our bunker, and they told us horrific stories of how they were ambushed. From the night of April 10 to 11, there was another breakout attempt. A different group went this time, and again, they were ambushed. If you already tried that route once and it failed, there is no point in trying it a second time. And the 3rd breakout attempt was made, it was pointless. That's when our unit decided. Instead of trying to reach mainland Ukraine, we would break through to Azovstal steel plant, to regroup with the Azov regiment and other units that were already holding out at Azovstal. We loaded up. The girls started bringing duffel bags and belongings for them, but we had agreed only helmet, body armor, and rifle, nothing else, so we could shoot back if needed. The girls were carrying their duffel bags, shouting, "Natasha, we're here! This way, come!" Meanwhile, Russian drones were hovering overhead. As soon as the girls entered the hangar, a 152mm white phosphorus shell hit us. They hit us with phosphorus right away. Everyone lost their vision. At minimum, I couldn't see for half an hour. Everything was just orange in my eyes. I couldn't see anything at all. Blinking hurt. My comrade couldn't see for over an hour. I was on crutches, missing a leg, and he was also wounded. We grabbed each other by the arms and, completely blind, just feeling our way forward in the dark, we made our way down into the basement to wait it out. Because we were one shell hits, more will follow. As soon as we made it down, the shelling started again. Once we came to our senses, we decided to evacuate back to the command post, CP, of our battalion, of our brigade, where the massive plan for the breakthrough was being developed. The next night, we decided to break through to Azovstal. Volhynia, one of the soldiers' nicknames, came and said, "We are breaking through to Azovstal. Who's with us? Who's not? It's up to you." No. So on April 11-12, we lined up in a column. We drove out following that column, and our driver drove straight into the crater from an air bomb. The vehicle tilted forward, the front dipped down, and that was it. We couldn't go forward or backward. The driver got out of the vehicle, and right then a Cossack, it's a Ukrainian-made armored vehicle, drove past. It had a winch. It could have pulled us out with a cable, but the crew just waved at us like, "Sorry," because it would have been too dangerous to stop. What could we do? We sat in that vehicle for 10 to 15 minutes until missiles started landing nearby, and we made a decision to evacuate to the nearest shelter, a basement about 80 meters away. There were 17 of us, all wounded. Only the driver was uninjured. We waited there until dawn. One of the guys said he saw a Cossack again and went to check. I told my comrade, "There is a Libid radio in the vehicle. Maybe we can call for help or in a back vehicle." He ran back and said, "Yes, we've got a signal." He got in touch with my commander and said, "There are 17 of us left, all wounded. We can't get out." And our valiant chief of staff replied, "Take any vehicle, hang a white flag on it, drive towards Zaporizhia, and surrender." This phrase was overheard by the evacuation driver who had previously taken me to the hospital, and he said, "I'm going to get them." He took Palich with him, another guy, and the two of them, in two vehicles, drove in broad daylight through Russian checkpoints from Azovstal to Ilyich. They picked us up. That's how we broke through to the Azovstal plant, without a single shot fired. I spent about 2 days in the bunker at Azovstal before a medic decided to send me to the hospital and evacuate me to the city of Dnipro. But every time they tried to evacuate us, as soon as they got us to the pickup zone, we came under fire. The vehicle would get shredded. Those who were already wounded, Cargo 300, got hit again, and this happened 3 times in a row. On the third attempt, we made it to the pickup site and took shelter under a bridge. Waited there for about an hour. Then, they started firing at us with 82mm mortars. We received an order to return because the helicopters weren't coming. They just weren't going to make it. We turned back, and on the way, they were hitting us with 30mm, 120mm, and 82mm shells. We returned again to the hospital. I called our command and asked them to let medevac take me back to my own unit, because if I were to die, I wanted to die next to my brothers. The next day, a comrade came for me, picked me up at night through all that destruction. It was like Silent Hill. We went down into the bunker. The guys thought I was already in the mainland, already fitted with a prosthetic. I'd been gone for only 5 days. There was barely any communication there. And until May 17, when the president gave the order to lay down arms and evacuate onto the enemy's custody, I remained at the Azovstal plant. Every single day we spent there felt like a fight for life. Not by the hour, not by the minute, not by the second. Not a day went by without us coming under fire. In just one day, over 50 rockets would rain down on us. But it was the naval artillery and airstrikes that were the most terrifying. When that Grad rocket hit me and tore off my leg, it wasn't even the worst part. Honestly, it didn't even hurt that much. But tanks? Yes. First to hear the incoming shell, then the outgoing fire. Still, nothing compares to the horror of naval artillery and airstrikes. We had a bunker beneath a 6-story building, and when a bomb hit, it didn't just damage the top, it crushed the entire building straight down into the basement. All 6 floors collapsed into rubble. The crater it left behind was big enough to fit 2 freight train cars. 2 whole train cars. Just imagine that. Imagine what happens to everything and everyone inside. The ground never stopped shaking, not for a minute. In my entire life, I've never lost so many friends, so many brothers in arms. I've never witnessed devastation like I did in Mariupol. Never.
How many brothers and sisters have you lost to this war?
Half of my unit was killed. The other half is now in captivity. This t-shirt, it's a reminder to everyone about our prisoners of war who are still being held in captivity, in those torture chambers, where they are tortured, starved, electrocuted, where dogs are set on them, where they are abused and not allowed to say a single word. This shirt, it's a cry from the soul for every soldier who remains in captivity. When we surrendered, they told us, "They're 3 to 4 months and you'll all be able to be exchanged. Everyone who leaves Azovstal will be home in 3 to 4 months. They're still there, still waiting." When I left Azovstal, I weighed 82 kilograms. After 43 days in captivity, I weighed just 46 kilograms. In only 43 days. And the guys are still there for 3 years now. It's terrifying to even imagine what they're going through. In captivity, all your thoughts are only about food and water, nothing else. No matter what the conversation starts with, it always ends the same, with food. Whatever you talk about, whatever you dream about, your dreams are always the same, to eat, to see your loved ones just once more. That's all. Those were the only dreams in captivity. You know, they're very... Russia's propaganda is incredibly powerful. Even while we were still in captivity, we began to doubt our own country. We started to question even our loved ones. Do we matter to anyone? Is anyone thinking of us? Will they ever bring us home? Will we ever return or not? Thank God I had a chance to call my wife 3 times. Because in the beginning, I was lucky. When we were first captured, those of us who had phones weren't immediately stripped of them. They only took sharp or dangerous objects at first, but they lasted only about a week. Then came the weekly searches with dogs. They began hunting for phones, even toothbrushes and toothpaste. They take boots from the wounded who couldn't walk. The Russians would just rip them off and say, "Oh, nice boots. I'll take this for myself." They took our t-shirts too, anything they liked, anything. They just stripped it off us. We were left barefoot, nearly naked, with nothing. They had the power. We were nobody. We didn't even dare to raise our eyes. But when we were first taken out of Azovstal, it was Dagestani soldiers who received us. And they showed respect. You could see it. They looked at us with real respect. That was genuine.
Ми очі боялися навіть підняти отак от. Але коли ми виходили
When they brought us to Olenivka,
нас приймали
one FSB Special Forces guy asked,
вони нас поважали.
"Why did you hold out for so long? Why didn't you surrender sooner at that plant?" And Mykola, my friend, replied, "Would you have surrendered? When there's a full-scale onslaught and it's just us? We were fighting with only 5.45 caliber rounds, up against aircraft, APCs, tanks, infantry, grenade launchers, mortars, and more. All we had left were bullets for our AK-47s. That's it. Nothing else. Just 5.45s. And even those were running out. Water ran out. We drank from the Kalmius River. It runs alongside the Azovstal. There were so many corpses in that river. It was horrific. We collected the water, and it happened to be flowing into Azovstal for cooling. A pipe led into the bunkers. Eventually, the pipe started to leak, and we just held up canisters and filled them. Thanks to COVID, Med and Bess had stockpiled antiseptic. We used that antiseptic to boil the water. We'd light it on fire, and it would burn. That's how we boiled the water. We cooked whatever we could find. Even potato peels from the trash. We had nothing to eat. So the guys went to the dump to gather old potato peels, probably tossed out 2 or 3 weeks earlier. We collected them, washed them in that water, fried them, and ate them. That was the only food we had. It was a survival, pure survival. It was brutal survival. You know, a person only truly begins to value life when they come face to face with death. When they understand that every single second, life can be taken away, and their sense of what matters completely changes. You start to find joy in the simplest things: a ray of sunlight, the song of a bird, the scent of flowers, the fragrance of blossoms, apricot, cherry trees in bloom. It all smells so alive. Fresh green grass, that's the real meaning of life. It was terrifying, beyond words in those moments. As I said, our lives were measured minute by minute, a second by minute, and in any second, you could be gone.
Наше життя просто на кожну хвилину йшли. Секунда, хвилина, кожну секунду можна було би загинути.
My final question to you is, were you tortured by your Russian captors?
I was tortured once. I suffered physical abuse. I was exchanged on June 29, and on June 28 they transferred me from the barracks to solitary confinement. In the solitary block, they stripped me naked and just beat me. I stood there, one-legged, leaning my head against the wall, hands behind my back, and they just started pummeling me like a punching bag. I was like a ball being thrown down that corridor in solitary. That was the only time I was physically assaulted. But I don't complain, because I only endured it once. The other guys were beaten every single day. They knew I was being sent for exchange, and this was just their way of taking one last shot at me.
Yuri Saiko, thank you for taking the time to talk to us today. It was truly an honor to sit down with you and hear your story. Thank you.
Thank you for the invitation. I was glad to be here in person, to meet you as well, and to share this story with a wider audience.
Загалом.
Thank you so much, host.
Від душі.
Слава Україні!